Greetings and welcome to this whole new episode of Let's Create Something with Trapcode TAO in After Effects. So today we're gonna create this kind of dripping liquid scene, and we're gonna look at a nice technique with OAS, offset animated sequence, how we can create this and have lots of control over it. And also we're gonna look at how we can have this nice kind of transparent blurry reflections on it. So let's get in After Effects right away, and I'm gonna get rid of this so we can start from scratch, and let's create this together. So first I'm gonna hit Control N, create a new composition. Let's call this TAO triple, and hit enter, and Control Y to create a new solid. I'm gonna call this TAO, and I'm gonna apply my TAO effect on that. We can shut down the automatically generated path because we won't need it in this example. And let's add a new light. So Control Shift Alt L. Let's make sure it's a spotlight. Let's make sure its radius is set to 100, and let's also make sure that it's called TAO all caps. Very important. And let's click OK. Let's hit Control Shift Alt Y so we can create ourselves a new null, which will put 3D. If you don't see that, just hit F4 or hit that button here to allow you to make it 3D, and then hit P. Grab the position from here, so Control C. Let's copy that data and let's paste it on our light. So let me just hit Control Z to undo. This is our light default position. We just want to make sure it's the same as our null, and then after we've done that, we can just pick with this to that in order to control the general position of our thing we'll do with this null. So let's call this settings, and let's make this color purple so we can assume that they're grouped together. And let's start ahead by creating our thing. So first we're gonna kind of want to create this funnel shape going up and down, but we're gonna do it differently. First we're gonna create the wiggling of our soon-to-be liquid, and then it's the OAS that's gonna make its evolution in space and time. So let's pick up the looping wiggle code from Dan Ebberts. So pretty handy there. You don't need to understand it, you just need to grab this. I'm gonna put the link down in the description below. So let's grab this patch of code here, and there's quite a good explanation down there. You can read it if you have the time to do that. So let's get back in After Effects, and let's hit P to reveal the position of our light there, and let's alt click on the stopwatch, and let's hit Control V to paste our patch of code, and I didn't copy it right, so let's go back in there and let's make sure that this is what is pasted there. So that'll make some default wiggling motion, and since TAO is unleashing geometry on this path, it's gonna make this as a visual result. So first we might want to go right click on our light and get under transform, auto orient, and set that to off. So that's just going to make sure that our light is aiming towards its angle of rotation and not aimed towards its position, its point of interest. So that's one thing we can make sure of. And next, let's create our little control panel here for our wiggle settings. So let's go under expression controls with our null selected, and let's get a slider control, and let's call this frec, and we're gonna duplicate that. So Control D on this, and this one, let's hit enter. We're gonna rename that amp, and we can also create a third one, and let's call this one seed random. So that's going to allow us to randomize our results here. So let's hit U on our light, and let's get back to this, and we can lock this down here so we don't lose it when we choose another layer. And let's put the same value. So frec is equal to 1. Let's put 1 here. And amp is equal to 110. Let's put 110 here. And our seed random is not something that's there yet, so let's add it ourselves. So first, let's just connect those first two. So let's select the value here, 1, and we're gonna pick with this to the frec value here, the slider here, which is set to 1. So nothing should change, really. Let's grab our 110 here for the amp, and let's pick with that to the 110 here, slider value. Nothing should change. The loop time, we're gonna leave it hard-coded there in this example. But the seed random, we need to add a line of code for this. So let me just explain something first. You might have noticed this happens sometimes when you're using wiggles and then you create a new solid. So let's create a new null, for example, and the result will change because the seed of the wiggle is based on the actual numbers here, the index number of our layers. So depending on the quantities of layer and where your layer is in the stack, it will use always the index number from the layer above it. If that's not that obvious to understand, let me illustrate that. So let's go to here on the first line of code and let's type down seed random, open parentheses, and let's pick with our seed random slider value here, and let's close the parentheses. You can add a semicolon, but I don't think it's necessary. And that's gonna change it because now it's set to 0. So it's as I said, it's always the number of the layer above. So this is the number 2, so it should be this 1. If I set this to 1, it should be the same thing that if I didn't have any line of code at all. But that means that keeping both these values here, a frequency of 1 and an amplitude of 110, we can have access to a whole range of other possibilities that are based on these values without affecting the values that we punched in at first. So that's quite handy. Sometimes you work on something, you add an adjustment layer to color correct it, and then it changes the seed so you don't look at the same thing you liked earlier. So lock on your wiggle with the seed random, and also put this little slider control to allow you to change its seed random manually at any time. All right, let's continue on. So now that we've connected the frequency and the amplitude, we can of course change that directly by changing those values here. So pretty interesting. I'm gonna save that. TAO ripple. And let's continue. So this, we can call it settings. So let's keep moving on. What are we going to do next? We're gonna make this fall, but we're not gonna apply that on the position. We're gonna do it with the OAS. So now I'm selecting my TAO layer, but I don't see my effect on the panel here because this has been locked here. I want to keep this there, so I'm going to keep it locked. And when I select my solid here, I'm going to hit F3 to make another panel of it, and then I'm going to simply drag it from the corner here. I'm going to drag it down there so I can have both in my vision at the same time. So let's get in the segments. Let's get in the paths from TAO lights, and we're gonna want to make sure that the size from radius is checked. And also in this example, so let's try to understand something. The duration, if no keyframe, is set to 10. We actually don't have any keyframes because we're driving it with expression. So this number is important. If we change it, stuff are gonna change. So remember, we're using a loop time of 3. So what we're gonna want to do here is set a value that is twice the amount of our loop time. So if we want this to be 3 seconds, then this we're gonna put down 6, and we're gonna set that to build up. So what that's gonna do by default is gonna build our path here, and since it's a looping wiggle, it's gonna repeat over and do the same thing after the 91st frame. So after the 3 first seconds, it's gonna start over and do it again. And since it's already built up, it's gonna already be there. So we're not going to output the first 90 frames of our thing. We're going to output it from frame 90 up to frame 179. So that's going to be 90 frames. And let's go to frame 180, and let's hit shift 3 to add a marker there, and let's get on frame 90, and let's hit shift 1. So we have one marker there and one marker there. We can jump between both. And on frame, I'm going to hit page up there to go back one frame, and on frame 179, let's hit N to close down our work area here. So it's only going to be this part that we're going to test out as we ran preview. So right now there's just one little difference between both, and we'll see how we'll go and fix that. So let's activate the fractal amp from fall off distance. This is also something we're gonna use. All right. So let's get down to the offset animation sequence, and let's check this in to enable us to play around with those values here. And we're gonna keyframe the OAS position Y. So that's gonna be how we're gonna make it fall. First, let's go to frame 0, and let's create a keyframe by clicking on a stopwatch here, and let's go to frame 90, and let's increase this value, so it's gonna go down. Let's go to something around 1040 or 1080. That's how tall our composition is. And let's bring this back up. So let's grab our solid, and since it's attached to it, we can simply bring it up like such. So pretty cool. We're gonna wanna make sure that it's high enough. All right. So this is going to make some nice dripping, and it's gonna accumulate on the bottom. If we go to frame 3, if we go to frame 1, and we've got this chunk that's appearing, but other than that, everything is great. Let's have this looped, so we're gonna alt click on the stopwatch here and get under the arrow there, and under property we're gonna set it to loop out type cycle. So now it's glitching a bit. If I go to frame 1 and I go to frame 3, it's almost the same, but it's as it goes down, then there's this moment where it goes back up, and it's creating geometry in between. So let's increase the amount of segments maybe, so we can get a better idea of what we're working on. Let's fix that with the OAS size. So let's create a keyframe by clicking on the stopwatch, and I'm gonna hit U to see where it is there, and we're just gonna make sure that as this ends there, it goes to 0 a couple of frames before. Alright, and then we're gonna add another one there, just to specify that it's got this duration for looping, and we're gonna copy this code there. We're gonna alt click on the stopwatch and copy it, so it's also gonna loop this thing. And so yeah, forget what I said. We're actually not gonna make this loop. So if we want to shut this off, we can simply click on here, or get rid of that line of code to make sure that it's not gonna do it. So we're also gonna change the let's get back under the offset and the offset animated sequence. We're also gonna make sure that we stay coherent with the first value here. So we're gonna use also 6 here, twice our loop time. So doing that, we'll have something that is on the last frame and on the first frame. Now we're gonna be about the same. There's maybe gonna be a few differences when you look up close, but this is not going to be a problem. So cool. This is it's not bad. It kind of loops there, and it's going indefinitely gonna drip there. So let's make our accumulation on the bottom there. It's gonna accumulate and it's gonna be a wavy. So let's make it so that it's gonna go super big just in the end, the OS size. So let's create a keyframe just before there, and this one, let's increase that. So let's make it real big, and as I do that, you can see that it kind of increases this thing, so it goes, and this is gonna loop down below. So we might need to increase this value so it goes a little bit further down there, and basically that's what we're gonna be working with. Of course, we can fine-tune this, and maybe we don't need this one. So like as it goes from 100 to 1500, we can ease this keyframe. So let's ease out, and let's make sure that we mess around with the curve and the graph there, so it goes more gradually there, and also this one, but not that it's so pretty cool. And if we move this, it's gonna go higher up, and now we can decide where we want this exactly, so it doesn't mess around in our field of view. So, and if we bring those too far, we're gonna have this thing that goes back up. So really important there, we want to keep the last frame at 0, and maybe right click on this one and make sure that it's held keyframe. So just make sure that the couple of frames before the frame 90, that it's at 0, so we don't have this thing going back up again. So let's test that. Oh, it's getting a little bit too high in our maybe we can decrease this depending on how real big we need it to be, and so this thing is going down there. We can perhaps also alter the position on here, so it goes at 1000 there. And then I'm gonna set this to a higher value, and then we're gonna move both those down. All right, so that's something that we're getting now. Not bad, not bad. Let's change the aspect of this now. We're still playing around with something that has 3 sides, so we can make it more cylindrical. Let's add some size there. We don't need to add too much. I mean, this is something that we can go under the rendering section here, and in the shader we can set it to smooth. And also we can, in the segments, we can uncheck the break sides. So without us setting that many segments and that many sides there, it's gonna it's gonna smooth it all down. And of course we might want to change our seed random, because I don't like this. It's getting in our face a little bit too much. So let's try to change the seed random there. I'm gonna try to find one that looks better. So this one looks much less problematic. Oh, it's still going in our face, isn't it? But this means that we simply gotta lower these down, maybe. So that's not bad. Something like that. And you can play around for hours there until you find the perfect one. And maybe it's also best to ease them, or maybe not. See what it just changed there. It became crazy. Let's set this back. Okay. Okay, this is a bit too much. Let's play around, and let's add a camera. So Control Shift Alt C, and let's make it 50 millimeters to start with. And let's create a new null. Control Shift Alt Y, make it 3D. Connect our camera to that. Call this dolly. Make it pink. And now we can rotate on the Y, maybe, if we want to. Look at it from another angle. That's less problematic. All right, now we have something that's a little more interesting to look at. Excellent. Let's color all that, and let's make it kind of a water aspect. So a couple of things here. First, we can make a background. So let's hit Control Y, make a new solid. We're gonna call this BG, and we're gonna bring this down the stack here, and let's add a ramp to this. Simple ramp, and I'm gonna try to make some kind of blue like I did in my example. So let's make this blue. Let's make this blue also. Some kind of a sky blue. Oh, this one is gonna be brighter, and this one is going to be darker, and more around these kind of shades. And Control Shift H here to reveal the layer control, and I'm going to bring this one up a little and maybe angle that a little bit like such. All right, simply so we can have some kind of background there. And I'm gonna just add end of blue in this, and maybe make it brighter. And let's see what our ambient occlusion is doing. So it's pretty hard there. We might want to lift it, and we might want to increase its scale, and you might want to try to do what you can to make sure that it's not in your way. All right, pretty cool. If we increase the amount of segments, of course we'll get more smoothness, but let's keep it down to work at first. And of course you can also, if you're kind of a 3D guy, you might want to get an idea of what your geometry looks like. It's sometimes convenient to have the second pass set to wireframe just to give an idea. So that's what we're playing around with. This is gonna help us to understand how our shapes are getting deformed by the fractal when we add it. So let's do that, and right away I can see that we have the chamfer activated, and this is not something we might need it, so let's turn this off. Then we have this nice geometry we can look at and know best what we can expect. So that's cool. Let's add some fractal in there. So let's get down to the fractal displacement. Where is it? Let's close down the offset, open up the fractal. Let's just put some arbitrary value at first, and it doesn't seem like it changes anything because the fall of distance is set to 0, and this influences the fractal. So I'm gonna set it back to 100, the default value, and it's gonna go crazy because I've set it to something. So this is gonna bring a little bit more wateriness in our stuff there, and you can play around with the different settings here to kind of get the deformation that you want. And now see this little thing here? That means that we need to bring this a little bit, not both of those, but this one, we need to bring it and refresh. And oh, is it going to be just, yeah, okay, we shouldn't be that worried about that thing for the moment. And for the good reason that it's not even there anymore. Oh yeah, it's there, but it's just we'll see if we need to get rid of it somehow. But first, let's say we want this to be even more influenced by the fractal. We can always come here in our light here, and we can keyframe the fall off distance. So from here, let's have it at 100 here, and prior to that, let's decrease it a little bit, or maybe let's increase it there, and let's have it even more down there. And are we looping? Of course, this would need to loop in our thing, so let's create a keyframe at the beginning and at the end, and let's all click property loop out type cycle, and let's look at it. So there's too much distortion at first, so let's grab both of these and let's decrease, and let's test it out. Not bad, not bad. I'm not sure I like it with that much fractal in it. So let's get back in here, and sometimes it's all about going under the individual, and there might be one in particular that we don't want it to offset in this direction. So let's see. So amplitude Y, yeah, maybe we don't want to have it on Y, so let's turn it on to off to 0, and let's see what we get. So this is what we get by having only the fractal distorting on the X and Z, and we can also smoothen this out. And let's set the oct scale to 1 and decrease this. So that's kind of what let's shut down our wireframe. Sorry if I'm not talking there, I'm just trying to fine tune the bottom part there so it doesn't suck as much. I just don't want to have these weird parts there. I'm trying to see what makes that, and if I can get rid of it by any means. It doesn't seem like it. Let's increase the evolution. Simply gonna try another result. So let's try that. And let's also sculpt it on the radius. So when it's our stream there, we can make it thinner, and so let's keyframe the radius there. And maybe set it to 80, so it's a little bit thin. And let's also make sure that this loop, so we're gonna grab this from there, alt click and paste it. And this should be the same as down there, I think. Oh, we could simply add some wiggling on there. So let's shut this off, and let's remove this, and let's grab once again the looping, wiggle, and let's alt click, and perhaps not that much, but let's see what we can get by increasing the frequency there and the amplitude. So trying different results there. Just trying to see if we can have some kind of overall wiggle in our path there. And we can even keyframe that to make sure, or on top of that, to make sure that it's thinner on the beginning, maybe. So let's try that. So I don't know that it's a good idea to have this here as well, because it's gonna make it decreased at one point onto here. So let's turn this off. And let's see, we can increase that up to 61, and that should, yeah, that should be all right. But we can go to, once again, our AOS size, and let's see, here it can be smaller. Let's see what we'll have, so something like that. And it's fun to see the control that we have while it's still looping, and that we can always change the random seed value of all that. So it kind of seems that it folds over itself at one point, so it needs to go down on the last keyframe on the OAS position, maybe, to fix that. Let's test it again. So we're getting a better result. Something like that, maybe. Now let's zoom in a bit. So let's put some reflection and some water, more water texture on that. So let's go under TAO, and I did it in my example with a custom SIBL, but let's use a built-in one. So material and lighting, let's see what would be nice. So let's try a couple. The sunset field, by default it's pretty cool. We would be able to use that, and we can rotate the environment. What is this weird patch there that we have? Let's try the green forest. Let's try the bus garage. Let's try the industrial room. The industrial room is not that bad. But if you want this to be kind of blurry, there's no setting to blur it there. So let's see how we can have this kind of a blurry reflection. So now we're using the industrial room. When you have downloaded Trapcode TAO, you should get this HDRI bundle. So this same industrial room here, we have an HDRI image here, pretty high res, 93.4 megs. So this image is what we're using right now in the built-in. We can bring it here so we can have control on it. So this, let's bring it to a new comp. And let's call this, let's rename that reflection, and let's make ourselves a diffusion. So let's pick that up and bring it on this here icon, so we can make a diffuse comp. And let's get in the diffuse comp, and this comp here we just need to lock the aspect ratio, and we can fairly smaller. So Control Alt F here to make it fit the comp dimensions. So transform fit to comp, and let's add a fast blur to that, and let's make sure the edge pixels are repeated, and here let's put something like 444, and I don't know why it's taking a long time. And let's get in the reflection, and this is what we want to blur if we want to get blurry reflection. So let's get this to 134. So this is perhaps what might look best, or even more, 222. So let's get back on here. Let's get in our main comp, and I'm gonna hit Shift F8 to take a picture. And then I'm gonna bring the reflection as well as the diffuse in here. So underneath here, we don't need them to be active, so I can shut them off. And let's get to TAO, and back in our SIBL and the smart image based lighting, instead of the industrial room here, let's set that to off, and let's pick up our reflection here, and let's pick up our diffusion here. So that's what we had, and that's what we have now. It's angled the same, it's the same reflection map, but now it's more blurred. So I think if we want to get some kind of liquidy, we at least need some degree of blurriness on there. So perhaps not that much. It's all about the tweaks. So let's try and have this down, and let's see. Control Alt front slash, because this might need to be refreshed, or else it's kept the same. So that's more like it. So pretty cool. This and also if we want to grade it, like since this is what it's receiving for the reflection and this is inside the diffusions, it's sliding it. So if we change the colors here, perhaps we want this all to be more blue. So let's bring in a let's how could we do this? Let's create a new solid. Oh, and even better, let's get in our dribble. Let's pick up our BG here. Let's copy that solid and get in our reflection. Let's paste it there, and it's going to be teeny tiny small. And let's hit Control Shift H, make the comp size, and let's hit P, position reset, and let's make this overlay. So it's gonna kind of color grade our reflection here, and automatically what we'll have when we refresh is something that's from the reflection, but that's also gonna be colored with our specific grading that we've put there from our background colors, so it fits. But now perhaps it needs some tweaking and adjustments. First of all, there's the Fresnel, so let's put that to 50. It's gonna change the way reflections interact with our thing there, and the diffuse holdout also. So let's increase that, and I'm gonna set this to quarter. And also what I'm gonna do, now everything is taking way too long to refresh, and that's simply because the reflection is pretty big. So perhaps I don't want to use that much of a big reflection, but still it's good to have the EXR because we have the high dynamic range, and we have all the range of colors to access. So I'm gonna keep it like that, but I'm gonna increase the specular, and I'm gonna increase the diffuse softness, and I'm gonna increase the exposed environment, not too much, just a little bit, and also increase that to 150 maybe, decrease the diffusion depending on what you want to get. We might need less shininess, set that to 20. It doesn't change anything because we don't have actual lights in there. So let's increase the diffusion pretty high. That's too high. Let's set our project to 32 bits per channel so it actually gets the whole range. And let's add an adjustment layer on top of all that. Let's call this CC. So I'm gonna be our color correction, and let's get a levels first on there. So right here we can bring this all the way to there, and then we can fine tweak it. maybe add a little more of that, like such. And over that we can add the curves. Make sure that our contrast looks neat. And on top of that we can add a tint effect just to desaturate it a little. And then we kind of have something that looks not that bad. But then again, our fractal is static, so let's animate our fractal also. And let's see which way we want to animate it. So offset X, I don't think it's that. Offset Y, no. And offset, let's increase that a little bit. I think we do want half of the offset Y at least, so it has more impact on our thing there. And let's set the complexity down a bit. Not that it's going to change anything, but let's animate the offset X. So on frame 90 I'm going to create a keyframe, and I'm going to hit 3 to get on the last. And is there any difference? There is. Let's see how we're going to fix that. So offset X, let's try 400, and let's get down to the seamless loop, hit that, and let's test our loop. Now there are some difference here and there, but overall it should loop pretty fine. Or we need to increase that a bit to make sure that this number is high enough. So that's gonna loop pretty well, and we can always increase the amount of segments at the end just to have everything smoothed down, and the number of sides, same thing. It's gonna smooth out everything, but if you worked with this set all the way up, it's gonna take longer times to refresh. I like this frame, it's pretty cool. Let's get in the visibility so we can pick up the color from the background here, and let's see, we can, I'm sure this is not as far as 400 pixels, so I'm bringing the far distance as close as I can until some back parts of my object starts to disappear. So I know I'm not even further than 2000 here, so I can set this at 666 and this one at 1800. So we're starting to come in from behind with our fog. Let's increase that value, so perhaps on 8888, and this one just to make it blend a little bit on the back there. It's gonna help us a little bit. With that, and what else can we do? I think that's pretty much about it. I think that's pretty much it. I mean, we can add, I think that this blue here on top is too saturated. We can decrease the saturation there and bring it up a little bit. And we can add one thing that I like to do sometimes. You can add a ray of light here, so I'm having nothing selected here, and I'm drawing with the pen, so it creates a new shape layer. I'm gonna create this kind of a shape here, like a cone, and I'm gonna make it some kind of a yellow color here, so it can actually contrast with the rest, and fast blur that, and also set this particular layer to screen and fast blur it, and put in more color now, and let's see how this maybe not gonna react that well. So it doesn't seem like it. Yeah, if I bring in a little bit of this kind of orange here, it's gonna make some kind of a cool light here, and I'm not putting that much time into it, but just to give you an idea of how you can add in a little bit more grading. So yeah, let's make it all smooth. If we set this smooth and normal in the fractal displacement here, let's set that to 6, and also let's set the frequency to 200, so we can have a little bit more of this kind of result on our floor there. And let's set that to the reset that to the let's reset the arc scale also to the default value, which is 2. And I think we can set all the default values in here to get, yeah, that looks much better. Let's test that, but first let's reduce the amount of sides. 200. I think we can leave that at 100 all the way, and let's refresh that and let's test it. Yeah, it kind of looks a little bit better like that. And oh yeah, and one last thing also we can do to smooth out how our fractal is to set it, instead of regular, let's set that to multi. So it's gonna make it a little bit more smooth, and of course what'll make it very really increasingly smooth is to increase the amount of sides to high numbers. So let's try 400. So this will need to be real high if you want to get more watery results, but I can understand if you get frustrated, because work and directly with these numbers here is gonna be quite annoying. That's why it's good to keep it down and increase it back at the end. So now I'm ready to render this. Let's say I'm ready, so I will put it back up and hit render. So yeah, that's all pretty much all I wanted to show you today. So as always, thank you very much for watching, and see you next time.